to gather firewood for 3 years only to burn it in 1 hour. This ancient proverb perfectly encapsulates the strategic defiance Iran is currently projecting to the world. The American colossus has inadvertently struck a military hedgehog, and there is now dwindling hope for a withdrawal that does not leave the US severely scarred. Tehran has boldly declared that they have been waiting for the Americans for 2 decades, honing their skills and hardening their infrastructure for this singular historical moment. The message from the Islamic Republic is clear: come closer. This combination of a military talon and a lethal economic blow has thrust the administration of President Donald Trump into a high-stakes psychological and strategic dilemma that challenges the very foundations of American power in the Middle East. For the longest time, when the Iranian military was mentioned in Western circles, it was often dismissed as a force with significant numbers but antiquated equipment compared to the high-tech arsenal of the United States. However, Iranian officials, most notably Ali Akbar Ahmadian, a senior advisor in the Supreme National Security Council, have asserted a fascinating counter-narrative. Tehran has spent over 20 years preparing specifically for an unequal war. In technical terms, this is known as asymmetric warfare. In simpler terms, if Iran cannot match the United States in the number of stealth bombers or nuclear-powered aircraft carriers, they will utilize cheaper, more economical, yet far more agonizing methods to strike at the inherent vulnerabilities of a global superpower. Iran makes no secret of the fact that they have constructed vast missile cities buried deep within the limestone heart of their mountain ranges. This subterranean architecture ensures that they maintain a second strike capability even if their surface-level bases are leveled by American Tomahawk missiles. The IRGC ground units, particularly in sensitive theaters like the Khuzestan province bordering Iraq or the craggy coastlines near the Strait of Hormuz, do not operate like a traditional standing army. They are trained to disperse, vanish into the terrain, and launch lightning strikes using suicide UAVs or man-portable air defense systems, MANPADS, before retreating into the shadows. The invitation to come closer is not a sign of weakness, but a confirmation that Iran has prepared killing zones for American infantry, where Washington's air superiority will be neutralized by jagged geography and a ruthless guerrilla doctrine. Conversely, the administration of President Donald Trump finds itself caught in a classic catch-22. According to sources cited by the Wall Street Journal, while the United States possesses overwhelming air power, military planners are fully aware that aerial bombardment alone is insufficient to completely dismantle Iran's nuclear and military facilities located hundreds of meters underground. These hardened and deeply buried targets, HDBTs, are designed to withstand even the most powerful conventional bunker-buster munitions in the American inventory. Consequently, various contingency plans have been submitted to the Oval Office, ranging from the deployment of elite special forces to large-scale heliborne air assaults to seize key strategic nodes. However, introducing American boots on the ground in Iran would be a decision of staggering historical risk. Iran's landmass is vast, and its terrain is significantly more rugged and mountainous than that of Iraq. Getting bogged down in a ground war at this juncture would not only be a catastrophic financial drain, but also a devastating blow to President Trump's political capital at a time when domestic issues and a looming election cycle demand his full attention. The most dramatic escalation in recent days has not occurred through the exchange of gunfire, but through the invoices issued at the Strait of Hormuz. Iran has initiated a move that diplomats describe as fighting while talking, imposing transit fees on commercial vessels. The fee, reaching upwards of $2 million per vessel, is a staggering figure that has sent shockwaves through the global shipping industry. One must remember that this waterway is the jugular vein of the global economy, carrying 20% of the world's daily petroleum supply. Iran's imposition of these fees, while unofficial and inconsistent, serves two primary strategic objectives for Tehran. First, Tehran is in desperate need of immediate liquidity to sustain its economy and its war machine under the crushing weight of international sanctions. This is their way of demonstrating de facto sovereignty over the strait. They are showing the world that while the US Navy may patrol the high seas, it is Iran that holds the keys to the gate of the Persian Gulf. Naturally, regional neighbors and global powers like India have expressed deep concern. Prime Minister Modi has spoken out regarding the sanctity of international freedom of navigation. Yet, as long as the threat of kinetic action remains, many shipping companies are forced to swallow the bitter pill and pay the fees to ensure their cargo remains safe from seizure or accidental incidents at sea. When one hears Iranian officials claim they have waited and prepared for 20 years to face the US, it is easy to dismiss it as typical Middle Eastern hyperbole. However, if we calmly analyze the chronological chain of events from 2003 to the present day, we see that the 20-year mark is a very grounded and realistic milestone. In fact, Iran never prepared to win a conventional head-to-head battle against the United States on an open field. They prepared to transform any Washington-led invasion into a localized nightmare, a quagmire from which there is no dignified exit. Let us recall the year 2003 when US forces invaded Iraq and toppled Saddam Hussein in less than a month. At that moment, Tehran watched with genuine trepidation. They realized that no matter how large an army is or how many tanks it possesses, the traditional linear style of warfare was a form of suicide against the overwhelming air power and network technology of the United States. From that specific moment of clarity, Iran began a total overhaul of its military philosophy. They stopped wasting precious resources on outdated fighter jets or massive surface ships that would simply serve as target practice for American missiles. Instead, they pivoted toward the hedgehog strategy. Over the last 2 decades, Iran has transformed itself into a creature covered in unique, venomous quills. Iran understands that America's greatest advantage is its mastery of the skies. To counter this, they chose to go deep into the earth. For 2 decades, Iran has excavated and reinforced a network of missile cities located hundreds of feet beneath limestone mountains. These bases are not merely warehouses, they are sophisticated mobile launch sites. The US might destroy every airport in Iran, but it cannot eradicate thousands of launchers hidden within solid rock. The moment the first wave of airstrikes passes, Iran can retaliate instantly with swarms of ballistic missiles and kamikaze drones. Furthermore, they have heavily invested in the weapons of the poor. Instead of a single $100 million stealth fighter, Iran produces tens of thousands of UAVs like the Shahed series for a few $1,000s each. Their tactic is simple but devastating. Use overwhelming numbers to paralyze expensive air defense systems like the Patriot. When hundreds of drones swarm at once, even the most advanced radar enters a state of saturation, allowing lethal threats to leak through the net. The brilliance and the danger of Iran's strategy is that they do not wait for the enemy to reach their doorstep. Over the last 20 years, Tehran has constructed what it calls the Axis of Resistance, a network stretching from Lebanon and Syria into Iraq and down to Yemen. These proxy forces are like pre-positioned detonators surrounding American bases and regional allies. Ahmadian's challenge to come closer is actually a warning. If the US touches Iran, the entire Middle East will ignite. America will not be fighting a single nation. It will be forced to manage dozens of fronts simultaneously. This is how Iran creates deterrence. They make the price of war the total collapse of the regional security architecture. Iran wants to prove they have already gamed out every American scenario based on the lessons of Iraq and Afghanistan. They no longer fear a ground war because they believe they have turned their territory into a labyrinth where any invading army will pay in blood and economic exhaustion. We have rarely seen such a bizarre and public contradiction in modern diplomacy. On one hand, President Donald Trump asserted with total confidence in Florida that he had reached a 15-point consensus with a high-ranking anonymous figure in Tehran. The reported content sounds ideal. Iran commits to never possessing nuclear weapons and agrees to keep the Strait of Hormuz open. Yet, almost immediately, the Iranian side threw cold water on the claim, flatly denying that any such negotiations had taken place. They asserted that for the past 24 days there has been no direct dialogue whatsoever. So, who is telling the truth? Analysts suggest this may be a psychological operation by Trump. By floating news of a nearing deal, he can temporarily soothe a volatile stock market and curb the skyrocketing price of Brent crude oil, which surged past $103 per barrel the moment hopes for peace flickered out. Currently, a Marine Expeditionary Unit (MEU) deployed from Japan, centered around the helicopter carrier USS Tripoli, has closed in on the Gulf, while a second group from California is still transiting the Pacific. Trump's mention of a 15-point deal may simply be a tactic to buy time. The US needs approximately 10 to 13 more days for its minesweepers and amphibious forces to fully assemble and consolidate. The potential target? Karg Island, the facility that stores nearly 90% of Iran's crude oil exports. If the US can seize Karg, it would hold Tehran's economic jugular without ever needing to launch a full-scale invasion of the mainland. Meanwhile, Iran is not sitting idle. They are utilizing every hour of this diplomatic lull to lay more sea mines, turning the Strait of Hormuz into a lethal maze before the American minesweepers can arrive. However, the reality in the skies tells a far different story. On March 24th, missiles were still flying. Iran launched a massive, coordinated strike using ballistic missiles and UAVs against targets in Israel and across the Gulf states in retaliation for Tel Aviv's recent strikes on Beirut and Tehran. The market's euphoria lasted exactly 1 day before Brent oil prices bounced back with a 4% increase. Investors have realized a fundamental truth in diplomacy: a deal recognized by only one side is not a deal. With Israel declaring that there will be many more strikes to come, regardless of the signals coming from the White House, it is clear that the so-called consensus remains a distant and perhaps illusory dream.